The city attorney told me this is a meeting, so I need to call it to order, so I will call this meeting to order. Hunter and the staff has done a lot of work. They basically listened to the input and threw out the prior proposal and have come up with something that they feel like really fits Fairhope a lot better, and have certainly listened to the comments that a lot of you in this room have put in. And bottom line, Planning and Zoning Commission staff members have not seen the new proposal. So we'll be seeing it for the first time right now, as will you. Basically, Hunter has a PowerPoint that he'll go over for about 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of the PowerPoint, he just like us to sit around in tables, not, all city people at one table. And he like us city folks, volunteers, what have you, to mix in with everybody else and just discuss the proposal that he has and come up with, the things that we like about it and the issues that we don't like about it, and make notes. And then after we have our roundtable discussions, somebody at each table will need to kind of write down the concerns, the likes, the dislikes, et cetera. Those will all be turned back into the city, and then the city can tweak this before we meet again. And that's the point. So there's no reason to frown yet, no reason to smile yet, because, this has changed so much that hopefully we'll be happy. But the bottom line is that, from an attractive standpoint and a business standpoint, we, one of the biggest things that the overall citizens of Fairhope say is please don't have it end up as Airport Boulevard. And that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to do it with as much concern for the business, as they say on It's a Wonderful Life, the people that do all the living, breathing, and dying here, Mr. Potter. So anyway, without further ado, I'll call Hunter up here, and we'll see what he has to present to us.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Yes, we're about to hand that out. So, and first, if anyone did not sign the sign-in sheet, raise your hand, and somebody's going to walk around and get that up. And then Emily, looks like we've got a few more than 30. We only have 30 copies, and what we'll do either this afternoon or first thing in the morning is post that on the website too. So this handout is, we've only got 30 copies, so we might just put a few at a table, if y'all can share and kind of look over that, and we'll go over that on the screen as well. And then we'll have that as on the website, as many as you want. So those are coming around, and while that's happening, I'll kind of give a little bit of background on why we're going about this the same way, because you'll see a cover letter from me that explains this. This is intentionally an incomplete document. I think if we came forward and put in a lot of work to get to a final document, anytime you put that effort in, I think it's human nature to kind of fight back against changing it, because we've got a lot of work to do and we're pretty busy. So what we're going to do here, at the end result of this will kind of be 4 parts. It's thinking about it simply, and then administrative section that talks about applicability. So today we're going to focus on applicability and kind of introducing a new regulating plan, and then what frontage types there are. So that's the introduction. I like to follow the rule. It takes 3 times of a conversation before you start really understanding it to criticize it. So I think the Planning Commission has agreed to have some extra meetings, but those will be scheduled during the regularly scheduled meetings. So February 3rd will be the next Planning Commission meeting. If we have another one, time and date will be set during that meeting, because we'll have a quorum and they'll need to make that motion. No decisions are made today. This is just a discussion. So are they all out, Emily? Okay. So one of the things I think you saw in the previous, to make sure we're clear on what you're going to see here, this is a much simpler document. And part of that is because at the same time of proposing the overlay, there were some other cleanups to the zoning code that had nothing to do with the Greeno overlay. But when you read it at the same time, your mind goes to that point. None of those proposals are in this document. We've taken out anything else that doesn't have to do with this overlay district. So I'm just going to kind of go through the only the properties within the municipal jurisdiction. So those that are in planning jurisdiction or permit jurisdiction or police jurisdiction, and I know that's confusing, and part of what we can do at the tables is explain those if there's any individual questions. That's kind of, I want to make sure we're on point on what we're talking about, because some of these things get wrapped up in jurisdictional issues, and we have a map showing where those municipal boundaries are. Single-family residentially zoned are exempt from the requirements of this section, and that is a very important distinction. Any overlay district, you see a bigger boundary than the parcels that are there, that are included. And residentially zoned, when we say they're exempt from the requirements, but they're in the overlay district, there's a lot of confusion on that. That is actually to benefit the property owner. Because if we take a map of just the properties within an overlay district and say these are the properties that are going to be impacted, what happens if you have someone that wants to rezone? Because what we're focusing on here is a lot of the historically residential properties, you know, are now coming to us wanting to be commercial. And the city's acknowledging where we have in the past said these are the commercial nodes, nothing outside of those should be commercial. And now we're looking at this more as a corridor. So as they come, if we don't have a boundary that's bigger than the existing parcels that are under this document, then they have to go amend the overlay districts, which is a planning commission and then a city council case. Then they come back and ask for rezoning. So being within the boundary, but not under the requirements of the district, there's no impact until the property owner is ready to come to the city. And then it just expedites that process. Properties zoned RA are also exempt from the requirements. They are in the district. Now, I think this is where we really get in the meat and potatoes, a lot of the applicability you saw. What happens if we have a storm, if we have this, if we have, it sits vacant for a while? I think we understand and heard, by putting an overlay district here, we're creating a lot of what we call nonconformities. If you don't meet that overlay, you're a nonconformity. So then what happens if you have a storm? If you have something, do you have to then come to the city and meet the requirements of this overlay district? So this is really backed out, and it kind of got a little, our question was, what is the threshold? And there's class 3 renovations, y'all saw that in the district, but that can get into a little value versus size and what is the renovation. We tried to keep this simple. If you have an expansion or repair to any business you own, and this is thinking about the structures, not the lot, but the structures, that is under 50% square footage of the business you're in right now, none of the things in this document apply to you. So that's as simple as we can make it. We can look at the numbers there, but if you've got a 10,000 square foot building, you can add on 5,000, and until that threshold, there's no applicability that's addressed to this. Related to that, there was also what happens when it sits vacant and uses. Now, I'm putting this in here, but I think another day when we get to the use conversation, there was a lot of prohibited language for uses. I think we're using, if you look at our current zone, there's special conditions, and I think we're trying to evolve to that. So instead of saying no drive-throughs, you have drive-throughs, but just like our underlying code, there's special conditions. You've got to meet this, You can't be causing traffic problems, It's certain just basics of what that drive-through should be. But if you have a non-conforming use, and right now you have 180 days. This has been in our code for as long as we can research backwards. If you have a non-conforming use, you have 180 days for it to sit vacant before you lose that right. And then it's whatever current zoning is. So basically, anything that does fall under the trap of becoming non-conforming based on this, we're saying let's give a year, and then you have the recourse is you go to BOA and ask for a variance, just like anybody with a non-conforming use. So that's our first volley. How does that sit? Is a year good enough? At some point, we've got to pick something. But what we're trying to get to on here is by doing this overlay, we understand our focus is a lot of new buildings and new things we're seeing, proposals, but you're impacted too because the courts have this thing they call uniformity. You have to treat everybody under this overlay the same. You're impacted by this, and we're trying to soften that up by doing something along these lines. Is it enough? I don't know. We can continue that discussion, but giving a little more time to when things happen that are unexpected. If there are overlapping regulations, these shall take precedence. If you have a PUD, I couldn't find anything on Greeno right now that this is applicable, but if you have a PUD and you've got where the buildings are laid out, then this doesn't apply. If you come in with a PUD and just kind of carve out lots and don't show how buildings are sited, then this applies. That's where we're going to with this. And unless otherwise noted, the standards of underlying base zoning districts shall apply. So we're not taking away your base zoning. That's still there. This sits on top of base zoning, and it allows things you otherwise couldn't do, and it can take away some rights. Let's be honest, that's a trade-off, and we hope we balance that right. That's what we're here to start that conversation. So as we said, there's really 4 parts as a property owner you would look at. Your regulating plan, and then we have frontage types. This is about the aesthetic of Greeno Road, so what does it look like from the road? And then you have uses and the special conditions about those uses, and then a building form. 4 parts. Today we're going to talk about the regulating plan and the frontage types. That's not to say that other things aren't important. We understand that, but that's a future conversation. There's just so much to this. I don't want to, throwing too much out, we get so many conversations. So you're a part of the process now, and this is what it looks like to make the sausage. You're in stepping through. So we will be able to commit once we kind of get feedback from here to the next step. So it's not that we're hiding anything, it just hasn't been developed yet. So regulating plan, this is based on where you saw the last proposal. Come on in, there were 5 districts, and those had definitive boundaries north and south. What we've done here is taken a cue from the way we've developed and based it around improved intersections. So where red lights are. And ALDOT has some guidelines with those things. So 250 foot is where they kind of have some restrictions on what you can do in ingress, egress. So we use that 200 foot and from basically red lights, let's keep it simple. And those become a core district. So those are the properties you see in red. Then there's a buffer district that extends out to 700 feet radius from the intersection. And where we got that number from, when you look at areas like Fairhope Avenue and Morphe, that's where they kind of start to merge. And then transitional districts are 3,000 feet out from those intersections. And I want to be clear, it's not shown on here. It's only these properties here that are within the overlay district. But a lot of those, as you can see, are R1, RA. They are not, there's no impact to those people except for being in the boundary. Until they come to the city and request a zoning change, they have no impact. Just because they're in the boundary really doesn't mean anything. When they come to the city and ask for rezoning, they don't have to wait on us to go back and amend an overlay district. That's why they're there. So everything you see R1 that's highlighted there, these are the properties that are impacted. And as you can kind of see, the boundary shrunk a little bit from north to south where you had the previous version. And I think it's a little more clear exactly which properties are here. And what I want to show you on the frontage types, and you'll see, we're using that to I think one of the biggest critiques that we heard was within a district, you had one option in the previous plan. It was this way or the highway. We want to provide more flexibility in how your buildings are sited on, and that's very clear. And this doesn't talk about what your building color is or anything like that. This is just where the building is on the site. You have that right now. It's called setbacks, and it's just kind of shuffling how that works. So I'm going to go through each of these types and kind of briefly introduce them, and then we can kind of have conversations at tables, and me and staff can come around and answer any questions that y'all might have. There's the core street. There's three basic. Each of the districts has a main unique to that space. And if you're within that core district, you have a couple of options. I think we've added one to the core since we've done this, just based on some feedback. Right now, every property owner on Greeno Road has 20 feet green space buffer that is required. That's our landscape ordinance that has been, or tree ordinance that has been in play for a while. So in some ways, we are making allowances. In this proposal, or this option, if so chosen, is a green space buffer of 5 feet. That still allows us to get the street trees, overstory trees that are required in. And there is a sidewalk, and then I want to show the build to area. What you saw previously was a build to line. That meant every building along the 6.5 miles had to come up to a specific line. That doesn't give much flexibility. A build to areas is, I think, gives property owners a little bit more flexibility and still gets across what we're trying to do with this. So a 5 foot area of where the front of the building is. There's, I think fundamentally you'll see as I go through this, there was a few things we kind of are making a stance on of what we're trying to do. So there is a desire to push things toward the front in certain areas, and that's right around the improved intersections. And this is mainly new construction. There is another option there, which we'll get to, that you can use, but where we landed was parking to the sides and rear is one of those we're kind of gonna, I think, live or die on new construction. We think that's important for what this is. And what we're trying to accomplish. The second type is the what you see in yellow on the plans, and we'll pull that up to reference when we talk. A green space buffer of 10 feet instead of 20, and then 10 feet of that is a flexible open space. So what we're doing by that is giving property owners more options, because right now you can't do anything within that first 20 feet except for have your landscape buffer. So this flexible open space, we can define that a little more if we need to, but that can be outdoor seating, that can be outdoor sales. It's given a little bit more flexibility, and then you've got 10 feet where you can build to. Instead of pushing it up to one line, somewhere within this 10 feet is where the building needs to be. And then to protect, we in our tree ordinance, we also have heritage trees, even giving another allowance to preserve trees, because we did see some of these sites where just pushing the building up would take out some pretty great trees, and that was some comments. So giving an additional allowance for that we felt was important. In the traditional or transitional street front, This is basically exactly what you can do today with one major exception. Instead of having whatever your front setback is, and that I can't tell you what that is because that's different depending on your underlying zoning. So B2 versus RA, whatever the front setback is what you do. Well, here, somewhere between 20 and 30 feet is your front build to area. So the building needs to be in there. The net effect of that is you get more room to build. The trade-off is parking needs to be the side or the rear. That's kind of the major two components, and there's other domino effects that come after those things, but that's the two big ones. But otherwise, it's pretty similar to what you can do right now, dependent on your front setback. And then we have some that can be used interchangeably in other areas. There's 4 more. Outdoor sales, dining. We took cues from what's on Greeno right now. I think that was important to see. So I apologize if I'm going to use some examples, any of your properties, without any forewarning. See, so I'm looking at you because yours is the first one, so I'll go ahead and tell you. This is going to be similar to the way your store is cited. And let me actually back up here. So similar to the first one, you've got a 5-foot. We need to preserve that green space buffer because let's wait till questions till we're done. Richard, thank you. Well, let's wait till we're done. The green space buffer is trees, street trees in the tree ordinance is important. They're required every 30 feet on up and down the road. So that is a requirement right now. So we're preserving that 5 foot so we can at least get that, make that, that's important. So we're going to keep that. Then the outdoor sales, dining, giving that 20 feet to do that in that area. We don't have a car lot, but we could. And what we can do here is provide them a street frontage where they can show some merchandise, whether that's a car, a plant, or whatever it is. But if they're, a big car lot, a Ford dealership, most of that kind of goes to the back, but they can still get some street frontage and visibility in the front. So example, Cecil is practically is not a double negative, is a conforming business under this plan because he would have flexibility to use this one or other frontage types. Landscape screened, I think we've talked about this one a good bit. One of the things you look at up and down Greeno, there's a lot of businesses that are just hidden. There's apartments that are hidden. You don't see them because we've had a history of good landscape or preserving kind of front yards. There's certain uses. If it's hidden behind a screen, then maybe there are no other restrictions. So that's the option here. There's an example. I actually was surprised to find this. This is not in the city. It's just south of the high school, but I thought it was a good example because there's 2-story apartments that you can't see at all. So that's an option. Internal circulation. This was a big one. We had a lot of folks saying, we might want to drive through. We might want this. So instead of using prohibited, there's certain conditions on how this is met. So you got a 10 or the green space buffer that's required, and then still pushing parking to the sides and rear. And this one's easier to see in reality than this slide. And that is Centennial Bank. They have all the requirements on that. This meets it completely. But you'll see, do I have the capability? This is the front drive. Let me see what you're seeing. Nope. The front drive is here. Parking is to the sides in the rear. Drive-through is on the side. That sits back with a 20-foot green space buffer. They have a sidewalk in the front. They're addressing the visually view from Greeno Road. That's everything we're trying to accomplish by this overlay. So you can see it. It's not, this isn't pushing something to the front of the road. This is using what's there now as keys. So then we have a park front. This is, if you want that manicured lawn, I doubt most people are trying to use this, but we do have a few that use this. One of them's our property. We have our properties. The city has responsibility for what the aesthetic is on Greeno. The high school fits in that. There is a manicured lawn as the front yard. There's partial parking. So that is a frontage type that would allow that use. And that is, I will put that up for a reference. I think before we ask questions, let's just talk for a little bit. We'll be moving around. We can ask questions. We can answer any questions one-on-one, clarify anything, and we need time to respond. So I hope there's a pad on each table. If you've got, I know some people are against it completely. We get that. But keeping this constructive for the folks that do, want to see something, that's our goal today. So constructive criticism is what we're looking for. So we're going to kind of break out. I and some of the staff will be able to answer questions. We're going to have a few maps, and we'll leave this one up. And if we need to look at individual properties, we'll be happy to do that. Your properties, we've got the map up here too that we can pull up, a zoning map if we need to. So this is trying to accomplish what would happen if you came in and talked to us individually about your property. So we'll do that, and if we need to, if we see some common questions that we can answer right now, we'll do that before we adjourn. So Mike and Emily, if y'all want to kind of pass a few of the maps out. And this is the same thing that's on the screen.
Well, one point that I thought was